for me, kind of the long and short of that, I don't get too ass-chapped about these distinctions, because I think what people are trying to do is to get some simple rules to help people buy in and do something different. Like, you can't just nuke people with every bit of detail around nutrition and diet and lifestyle change if they're trying to do something new. You've got to have some starting place. And some people pick vegan, some people pick a Mediterranean diet, some people are more in this ancestral health, paleo, keto, carnivore. And I think that what they're trying to do by and large is just provide some simple heuristics, some simple rules of thumb to be able to start with and move people forward. The real danger in all that, to me, is that then people take these simple stories and carve them into stone and create religious doctrine, and then that's where the shit show starts, because then you get the factionalization and people dig in their heels.
We are here because we know the outcomes in our lives are within our control. That taking absolute ownership of how we eat, sleep, train, think, and connect with each other is how we'll optimize our health and happiness. That chasing excellence is how we grab hold of what is possible. Our mission is to live on the run, always chasing, never stopping. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Chasing Excellence. How are you, Ben?
I am doing good, Patrick. Thank you.
Good. We are joined today by a special guest. Robb Wolf has joined us from his new home in Montana. He was just telling us that he just drove across the country to get there. So thank you, Robb, for taking the time to talk to us today. For folks who maybe don't know who Robb is, I imagine they're very few and far between. But Robb, you are an author, best-selling author of Paleo Solution, Wired to Eat, Sacred Cow. You are the founder of LMNT, and you are the host of the Healthy Rebellion Radio. Is that what you guys call it? Healthy Rebellion Radio, and the community that is sort of you're building with that. Yep. And so given all that, I think all three of us have sort of started, at least in the specifics of the CrossFit community, roughly around the same time, 2006. Maybe actually, Robb, you probably even just a smidge earlier than us. But we've been doing this thing,
yes.
Yeah. So we've been talking about this for a long time, and so the three of us have obviously run into each other over the years. And Robb, I first came across you, first met you when you were on the level 1, and you were people felt lucky when you showed up to an L1 because they knew the nutrition lecture was going to somehow be, be jacked up. And so I remember those. Over the years, whatever that is, 10, 15, 20 years or whatever, we've watched you do a lot of different things, right? Writing, researching, all of these things. And so I'm really curious. I think my first question to you is, what do you consider yourself like, right? If you're at a party, not that we go to parties anymore, but like, how do you introduce yourself at this point? Are you an author? Are you a researcher? Are you a fill in the blank? I'm really curious, given your history and your experience, where you sort of land and how you sort of think about yourself.
Yeah, if it's actually like a barbecue or something and I want these people to talk to me again, then I usually say, hey, have you heard of like the paleo diet or ketogenic diet? And then I usually say I've written some books around that. And usually I do also ask, have you heard of CrossFit? I co-founded the first and fourth affiliate gyms. And so that may be kind of an inroad there. If it's more of like a media interview, then I usually present myself as like a health translator, because there's so much information that needs to be collated and sifted through and then translated for folks. And, I look to people to translate the financial world for me. And like, if I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to do some file compression type stuff. So I find some people that are in the geek space that translate using, this open source software to be able to solve some of the problems that I have. So I think, information is largely free and ubiquitous, and that is almost meaningless at this point, unless you have the time to go in and just devote huge resources to understanding all this stuff. So I think in the different verticals that people are interested in, whether it's like archery or CrossFit or whatever, you find somebody who can translate this huge amount of information, and then you start kind of systems checking, is what this person telling me actually translating into better performance or better outcomes for us? And I think that that's where kind of like folks will kind of agglomerate around a person around a certain topic. And so far, I seem to be attracting a few more that I'm chasing off, at least at this point. Yeah.
Good.
So first off, it was said really quickly, and I think that people should. You're the first CrossFit affiliate, correct?
Dave Warner, myself, Nick Dibbler, we
North?
co-founded CrossFit North up in Seattle in 2003. And then I had an opportunity to move back down to Chico where I did my undergrad, and we opened CrossFit NorCal, which was the then fourth CrossFit affiliate. Yeah.
I love that the idea was that we could get a CrossFit North, and maybe we get an East to South and a West, and then we'd be kind of done, right? And there'd be CrossFit like Central.
There was kind of that thought early on,
Yeah.
it was like pee on as big an area as you possibly could. And then, yeah.
That's amazing. I really love the idea of like the translator aspect of this. And it's one of those questions I think everyone kind of has, and they kind of navigate towards people for certain reasons or another. I think you said it really well, is like, is the information that's being translated resonating in some form of performance? And if so, the trust levels go up, and I'll come back to that person a little bit. And certainly you've earned the credentials and you've earned the trust of a lot, myself included. I know that like when we started off, it was mostly about paleo. The zone world came into that. And then since then, there's been these other movements or terminologies that's popped up. And I wonder if maybe we should start like from a real broad brushstroke to help people, connect some dots, and we give some language to the words. But like, there's paleo, and these things kind of run into each other. That's why I want to there's paleo, there's carnivore, there's keto, and there's ancestral health.
Right.
Like, are we all just looking at the same thing from different angles, or are these different things? Does it matter? And do you espouse one over the other? When we think of those 3, 4, 5 terms, what should we know and what should we be understanding?
Man, that's actually a really, really good question. I do think that kind of the heuristics and the epistemology around that matter. Like Greg Glassman did a great job in defining what is fitness to kind of set up a case for what is CrossFit. Like there was I don't agree with all of the conclusions that came from that, but it was a really, really slick epistemology that was there, And so for me, this idea of a paleo template is very powerful, but I think that the overarching idea of ancestral health is really the thing that provides a little bit more credibility, and we kind of avoid the potential, particularly when this stuff starts going into like mass media and whatnot, of just being this caveman reenactment kind of story, which I think is a huge failure point. I don't know if you guys follow Brett Weinstein in the Dark Horse podcast, but I love the podcast. He's an amazing guy, evolutionary biologist. Both he and his wife are evolutionary biologists. And they make this case that, if evolution via natural selection is the foundational underpinning of biology, and medicine and physiology, and by extension, exercise science, are just offshoots of biology, then evolution via natural selection should be like this huge process. Like it should really inform our thinking around what we do. And it really doesn't. If you talk to a physicist or an engineer, like things like Newtonian, physics or quantum mechanics are part and parcel to everything that those folks do, because they're the foundational underpinnings of the methodology that they use. So I do think that defining these terms are really valuable. I think that where you start seeing some granularity pop up. So it's funny, paleo was this term that was kind of generic, and so you can't really patent it. There's no IP around it, really. And so you had some folks that were smart, like the Whole30 folks, that basically took the paleo concept, created some somewhat arbitrary lane lines around it, had a intellectual property defensible kind of framework and a name and everything. And they've done amazingly well. And I can't tell you how many people I've met that they're, we'll start talking. They're like, oh, you do the paleo stuff. Okay. I could never do that. I'm like, okay, well, what do you tinker with? And they're like, I do Whole30. I'm just kind of like, check. Okay, so you don't understand this stuff at all, but you found something that works. And I think that like within carnivore, and then like Michaela Peterson spun up this lion diet and whatnot, I think that people kind of get their own kind of flavor of these overarching concepts. And then also it's great if you could find something that is just from an IP perspective, like defensible, and having these really generic terms and linking your wagon to them over the long haul is actually kind of problematic because at least you can control the messaging of a topic. And that's a little bit of where it became challenging with even CrossFit itself. Like, they defended kind of the name and the brand and whatnot, but what constituted the methodology, like a good CrossFit gym from a marginal CrossFit gym, it was really hard to define that. Whereas like if you seek out like a starting strength gym, you have a pretty good sense about what you're going to get, whether it's in Kansas or New York. Like there's some real consistency to it. So I think that there's a lot of different reasons why these topics pop up. Some of them I think are well thought out. Some of them are just kind of a land grab for a business process. But I do think it is important to kind of understand these different terms and where they come from and kind of what they mean for sure.
So how would you, to understand them and the difference between them, what would you say, like if you were to give like an elevator speech for carnivore versus, so I think most people have a good understanding of paleo, right? Mm-hmm. Like caveman, what cavemen eat. Carnivore, maybe people have a good understanding because I kind of get it. Like, if you're a predator, you eat other living animals.
Right.
What about this? So I still think there's a misunderstanding in terms of what keto is even. And then certainly ancestral. Would you say, what is the difference between that and paleo? Because somebody might look at that and go, ancestral, okay, ancestral biology, paleo, and so on.
Yeah,
is there a difference? I don't even know.
I'm more of a lumper than a splitter, so I tend to just kind of throw everything together.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
And other people, the ancestral health, though, encompasses like gut microbiome, circadian rhythm, exercise and movement patterns, socialization. Like just COVID kind of exposed in a really interesting way a major failure point within the ancestral health model and paradigm relative to the way that we're evolved to live. We really do well, even in difficult, stressful situations, if we can have community and proximity to other human beings. And pandemics have been one of these rare circumstances where we see the stress levels and the difficulty of separating people is on such an entirely different level. And Zoom just doesn't fucking cut it. Like it helps a little bit, but it is not the same of like embracing someone and spending time with people. And the why to that is that we evolved in small extended family groups, and it is woven into our DNA to be kind of tribal. And you get the odd individual every once in a while that is really a loner and they really don't need socialization with other people. And not infrequently, they don't really plug into the rest of society all that well, because everybody else is kind of wired up differently. So this ancestral health model, nutrition is a piece of that, but there's so many other factors that nest under this concept. And I think that this bridges the gap into kind of the academic world, the people that are doing research on this stuff. It does a good job of doing that. Paleo is a problematic term in that what exactly does that mean? Because when they laid out what went into the nutritional underpinnings, there's a lot of variation. Like there are the more northern latitude hunter-gatherers like the Inuit who eat a very low plant-based, plant-inclusive diet. And then you have like the Katavan people around Papua New Guinea that eat a 60% carbohydrate diet, 70% carbohydrate diet. There were some commonalities there, but when folks would do research and they would call it a paleo diet, there was a lot of kind of gnashing of teeth about like, well, what were the protein amounts and all this type of stuff. And I do think that this is where a ketogenic diet is a little bit more amenable to research, because we can at least agree on defining what a ketogenic state is. Your blood ketone levels are 0.5 millimolar beta hydroxybutyrate or higher, and we just kind of go from there. But the irony with that is that we have a classic epilepsy intervention ketogenic diet that is very low protein, very high fat, very low carb. Then we have things like the modified Atkins diet, which has actually been used within athletic settings for quite some time, and one does usually enter a state of ketosis, but it may be transient because of the amount of protein that folks are eating. But it's still technically a ketogenic diet. But people will just freak out around, well, that one's not really a ketogenic diet because the protein is higher than like 20% of total calories. And it's funny, even on the carnivore front, you have a factionation within that. You have some people that feel like you absolutely must eat nose to tail. You've got to eat all the fiddly bits, the liver, the brains, the heart, the whole deal. And then other people have discovered that they do best on like ribeyes or whatever, and they don't eat any variety in it at all. And some people eat some dairy, some people don't. Some people feel like a little bit of fruit here and there is okay. And I think for me, kind of the long and short of that, I don't get too ass-chapped about these distinctions, because I think what people are trying to do is to get some simple rules to help people buy in and do something different. Like, you can't just nuke people with every bit of detail around nutrition and diet and lifestyle change if they're trying to do something new. You've got to have some starting place. And some people pick vegan, some people pick a Mediterranean diet, some people are more in this ancestral health, paleo, keto, carnivore. And I think that what they're trying to do by and large is just provide some simple heuristics, some simple rules of thumb to be able to start with and move people forward. The real danger in all that to me is that then people take these simple stories and carve them into stone and create religious doctrine. And then that's where the shit show starts, because then you get the factionalization and people dig in their heels. I was kind of like that early in the scene, because like a really low carb paleo-ish type diet worked great for me. And I had good performance on it and everything. And I couldn't believe that not everybody, that wasn't the bee's knees for everybody. You know, I had health problems. It fixed my health problems. It improved my performance. Why doesn't this work for everybody? Well, not everybody's the same. And I had to break a good number of people to figure out that, you know, some folks doing really high motor activity need some carbs, and probably quite a bit of it. So yeah, I don't know if that 100% answered your question, but yeah.
I don't know if it does either, but it spurs a whole bunch of new questions. So I've already forgotten my previous one.
Perfect.
My memory is a goldfish. So 10 seconds and I'm ready for the next one. So
perfect.
All right. So yeah. So high carb, low carb, high power output activities. We don't want to carve things into stone. And I know what the answer is always. I am on a podcast too. And the answer is, it depends.
Yeah.
Okay. But is keto right for CrossFitters?
Could be.
Depends.
It really depends. The interesting thing around that is when you look at the workload of most CrossFitters, you could probably be in a ketogenic state most of the time and still consuming 200 grams of carbs a day, which in ketogenic world, that's like a
Wait, say that again. Say that again. Yeah. That's, I'm saying, say it again, because that's blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. So like in standard kind of ketogenic circles, 20 to 30 grams of carbs total per day is usually what is recommended and accepted. Some people will goose that up to about 50 grams. But what we find consistently is if people do kind of an induction phase, they do a legitimately low carb phase, they're in that 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrate per day.
And do you say that that's total grams, or is that net?
Net.
Are you taking fiber out of that?
Taking the fiber out of it. Yeah. Just what is going to be metabolically present. Yeah.
Yep.
And you do a period of time to adapt to that. And then we start titrating carbs in and thinking about strategic timing, pre-workout, post-workout, maybe most of the carbs earlier in the day. What we find is somebody doing a workload like CrossFit or MMA or something like that, they may not be 100% in ketosis all the time. And most people on ketogenic diets aren't 100% in ketosis all the time also. But what we'll find is people can be 200, 150, 200 grams of carbs a day, particularly on high workload days, and still in that 0.5 or higher beta hydroxybutyrate level. Yeah. And this is one of the things that, so what constitutes a ketogenic diet? You know, it's not necessarily the amount, it's the physiological output, you know, of being in a ketogenic state. And what people find then is that they may find kind of a sweet spot where they've got really good long-term motor. Like if they just need to go, they can go for days on that kind of keto fueled engine, but they also have enough glycogen in the mix that they can do these more intense physical bouts. Maybe they're putting in, in addition to proper electrolyte supplementation, 10 to 20 grams of glucose per hour when they're doing high motor activity and whatnot. And still, they may be in a technically a ketogenic state. So that's where we have to be way more flexible with this and looking at what works for a guy like me. I mainly sit on my ass. Like I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I lift some weights, but really when you look...
You look pretty good for a 48-year-old who sits on his ass. Thank you.
I don't look at my backside though, but that is the most worked part of me, just sitting. But what I need to do to be able to fuel my activity is so different than somebody who like is looking at Bud's qualification or something like that, or doing CrossFit. So could a ketogenic state be beneficial for somebody doing CrossFit? Yes. But again, we really have to structure it mainly for performance outcome. And we can have an eye on whether or not we're still in that ketogenic state. But this is where I think that people, should I fast or not? Well, what's the goal? What's the context? Like if you just think it's going to make you live forever, then we really need to back that up and kind of unpack it. But folks will go after things and they'll hear about somebody that had 100-pound weight loss on a low-carb ketogenic diet. And they're like this super hard charging athlete and they're already like 10% body fat and muscular, but they want to get to 8% body fat. Just going ketogenic isn't necessarily the way to do that. Like what gets the person from 50% body fat to 15% body fat may be very, very different than what takes a 10% body fat down to 8% body fat. But when we see these really profound changes, then it's striking. It's like, wow, if that worked for him, I only need to go this little bit of distance. So clearly that'll work for me. And oftentimes it's not the case at all.
Okay, so let's drill into that a little bit. So if somebody needs to lose the 25 to 50 pounds, ketogenic could be a really good vehicle for them.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to go from 15% to 8% body fat, what direction would you? That's most of the people that listen to us, by the way. It's like we're CrossFitters, so most of the guys are probably hanging around the mid to high teens, and they're trying to get down to the six pack, 12%, 10%, and most of the girls are probably hanging around the 16 to 25 and trying to get down again below the 15, 16, 18. If that's the case, and people are like trying to lose the 5 to 10, they're trying to go from 3 muscle ups to 5. They're trying to go from a 340 Fran to a 315 Fran. So performance matters. They want to do better in the open. They want to look better on the beach. They are, they're going to the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week, maybe doing a second session a day or two here there. They live and breathe this stuff. Where do you start with somebody like that? Because they've already obviously started. Like they're pretty well into the journey.
Yeah. It's funny. Now I try to start people, funny enough, even though I'm saying that these things are different, I do lean much more heavily towards just a protein-centric starting place, whether we're talking about that very overweight individual or the more lean athletic individual.
So it's the same starting point.
It ends up being much more similar in that we really focus on protein. And this is one of the, I think, damaging after effects of like keto as a concept. You have people hardly eating any protein and eating sticks of butter, or sticking, whole sticks of butter in their coffee because of this fear of insulin and blood glucose and whatnot. And if you don't eat adequate protein, it's very easy to overeat whatever else there is, whether it's carbs or fat. So I really like to start people at least a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass, up to a gram of protein per pound of body weight. And so there's kind of a spectrum there. And if you're a 300-pound individual that is significantly overweight, then we're mainly focusing on the gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. Then we introduce a mild caloric restriction, or if person's more aggressive, a little bit more severe, somewhere between like 15 and 20% calorie restriction in the more overweight individual. And for the leaner individual, kind of similar actually. But then we figure out do they do pretty well on a fat-based fueling regimen? Is it more mixed, kind of more like a zone kind of deal? Or do we need to do more moderate fat and higher carb to be able to maintain their work output? But we really, my focus has become very protein-centric as a beginning place. And then we kind of backfill the rest of the calories partitioned between fats and carbs based off of how the person best functions in that scenario. And I always remind folks that the place that they may perform best may be very, very different than the place that they look best. Like you can shoot into a level of leanness where you look super jacked, you look super impressive, and usually the relative strength stuff like muscle ups and max pull-ups and stuff like that may be better, but actually their work capacity and definitely their absolute strength numbers may decrease significantly. And it's just like a 2, maybe a 3% body fat level. But a guy that's at 5% body fat generally is going to have poorer overall endurance and definitely not as good relative strength if he's at more like that 8 to 9% body fat level. And we tend to start seeing testosterone levels drop and whatnot. It's not 100% across the board. You get some genetic outliers, but yeah, I always remind people that you may want to look super, super jacked, but if you want to perform super well, those two things may be at odds. And this is where you may periodize that stuff a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. That's why bodybuilders aren't at the CrossFit Games, but most CrossFitters could probably go into a bodybuilding competition within a month
and do pretty well. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings up 2 questions. People hear protein. I love the numbers to start with. A gram for every pound of lean body mass for the for the heavier people that need to lose weight, and then up that towards actual weight as people get more lean and performance becomes more of a metric. But as we talk about more and more protein, people go like, okay, like protein, but protein for most people is at odds with like nutrient density. And what we look at is like a colorful plate. And I think that there's this misconception that a whole food diet. Like a whole food diet is the healthiest thing. And a whole food diet, it has the highest fiber and the lowest amount. So where do those things, I mean, hopefully I'm setting you up for something.
Yeah. No, it's good. In Sacred Cow. So even though it talks a lot about the we cover the health, environmental, and ethical considerations of a meat-inclusive food system. And so a bunch of this stuff may not be germane to people, but it's interesting when we dug into the health considerations of a meat-inclusive food system and diet, we really looked at nutrient density a lot. And it's interesting that it's difficult.
Can you just explain quickly before you go into what nutrient density is?
In general, it's the amount of nutrition, vitamins, and minerals specifically relative per calorie. And that's as the food exists on its plate. But the other part of that also is how much of you can actually get in your body. And so animal products are disproportionately rich in nutrition as it sits on your plate and are massively better absorbed relative to the nutrients that you get out of plant material, by and large. This is where like people will do comparisons of like spinach versus beef and whatnot. And in general, it's interesting when you really hold the feet to the fire on this nutrient density story. Plant material starts looking kind of suspect as a go-to, and I say that with reservation because I don't think everybody should eat carnivore and all the rest of that stuff. But goddamn, if it doesn't kind of look that way at times, like when you really dig into this nutrient density kind of story. Fruits fare well. Some roots and tubers fare well. Things like kale look really nutrient dense, and I'm not saying that they're not valuable, but the absorption of a lot of the nutrients are not spectacular. And when you start getting into grains and legumes, like it is even kind of a stair-step fashion, more challenging. And this is some of the stuff also that is really, it still is something that I kind of spin out on. If you reduce general carbohydrate intake it appears that your B vitamin needs also decrease. Your vitamin C needs may decrease. So the nutritional needs of someone on a higher carb diet, particularly if it's refined versus a lower carb diet, may be different just based off of what is passing through their body metabolically. Somebody on a higher fat diet definitely needs more choline, probably more taurine, which is usually achievable if you include some things like liver and whatnot. But depending on what an individual is eating, that can actually change the nutritional needs as well. But that nutrient density and satiety, some folks in like the It Fits Your Macros camp and more of the evidence-based nutrition camp, you can find people that will weigh and measure anything. They will eat a half of an Oreo and they can live with that. But I think that these people are almost like serial killers. Like they don't happen that much out in the general world, and somebody that's got 2 kids and a job and all the rest of that. Some people do it great. This is one of the interesting kind of like almost straw man dismissals. It's like, well, paleo is hard to do or keto is hard to do, so don't even bother doing it. And I'm kind of doing that same thing around weighing and measuring your food. It's like, oh, it's a pain in the balls. So it's not true. Some people do well with it. Other people don't. I was a chemist by training, and I would honestly rather hang myself with piano wire than weigh and measure every goddamn meal I eat. So it's just, again, we have to find some customization in the way that we get people moving forward with this stuff. But I really, my sense and what's interesting is if we do a little bit of tracking and we put stuff in something like Chronometer that gives us a breakdown of the protein, carbs, fat, and also the vitamins and minerals, kind of a meat-centric approach with some seafood and then some berries, a little bit of roots and tubers, and some greens, doing that multicolored plate, it plays out really, really well. And and aside to that, and to me, kind of an interesting aside, is somebody that's doing a modest amount of activity, some jujitsu, they're recreationally CrossFitter or something like that. They can do that approach and they can eat kind of like a nutrient optimized diet, relatively low calories, and motor along just fine on that. When we start pushing into elite athletic performance, it is virtually impossible to do that without adding in some really nutrient devoid foods. You have to start doing some more white rice or maltodextrin or refined fats like coconut oil or whatnot because the work output is so high. And I think that that's kind of an interesting diversion from that sickness, wellness, fitness kind of spectrum that Greg Glassman developed. I think it's interesting, but I think that it's actually like a triple point thing where things diverge at different points. And there's a trade-off between elite performance and just, wellness at some point.
So in terms of the nutrient density, staying on that, maybe like a different take on that is if somebody finds that they are, let me say this another way. It seems like the best way to figure out the nutrients that you need specifically is through blood tests and blood markers. And if somebody was to get that, first off, do you recommend that? And then if so, what should they be looking for? And if they don't go that route, and then I guess that leads into the question of like supplementation, but maybe we'll just start with, let me just ask that first question is there a place, do you recommend people get blood work done? Or is it no, if you just eat these nutrient dense foods and you live that lifestyle of moderate activity, low stress, you'll be good? Yeah.
I forget which one of my friends first turned this on to me. It may have been Dr. Kirk Parsley. I forget who said this first, but it was a physician friend, and they said, I only test what will change what I would do clinically. So they don't go digging just for data. And this is one of the challenges that I have right now with like all these wearable trackers and everything. People are buried under information and none of it informs anything that they would do differently. Like nothing. They just fucking spin out on data, So the main spot that I would start looking for nutrient deficiencies or doing blood work around like vitamin status or whatnot is if there's legit problems occurring, like, is there some GI dysfunction? Is the hair falling out? Do they have split nails? There are some folks that have really made a remarkable cottage industry and charging people a remarkable amount of money to do this blood work. And then there's the supplements that end up on the back end of that. And man, it's a great business model, but I don't really see it move the needle on that many people. Again, like if somebody was vegan for a number of years and they're debating about transitioning to a more like animal product inclusive diet, I would definitely check them for like iron, zinc, B12, and B vitamin general status. And maybe even just as a leverage to be like, hey man, this thing isn't working for you. So we either need to really double down on supplementing this or we need to change the diet at large. And, you know, a guy that is really, really sharp on this nutrient density stuff is a guy, Marty Kendall. He's out of Australia. He has a program called data-driven fasting, which it isn't just about fasting, but he's an engineer by training, and his wife developed type 1 diabetes, and he was appalled at the standard of care she was receiving. She was having all kinds of problems, and so he dug into this problem with a completely fresh set of eyes and an awesome skill set for data analysis. And he arrived at kind of a low carb, peri-ketogenic, high protein type of diet. And then he's really done a deep dive on nutrient density. And he would be a great guy to have on. Like he's just taken this nutrient density topic to an entirely different level. And I have to kind of like tip my hat to him. He's done an outstanding job on that. But it is interesting what he ends up recommending, and it's awesome because it pisses everybody off. It's way lower fat than like the low carb jihadis like for the most part, because most people just don't do nearly as much physical activity as what they think. They don't need as many calories as what they think. And if you really want to tick all the boxes of the you know, getting as broad and deep a nutrient profile as you need, tends to be leaner proteins, tends to be more.
So when you say it's much lower fat, like what is what you gave a nice number for protein. Is there a similar benchmark for us for fat?
I forget, but it's definitely not like the 70% of calories that is generally recommended for like a ketogenic diet. It's just tends to be lower. And again, this is where it becomes highly variable because depending on the person's size, how much weight they do or don't want to lose, their physical activity and whatnot. But it's definitely just generally lower than what is recommended with the standard ketogenic diet. And then his plant material recommendation is pretty high, and a lot of it from kale, spinach, broccoli, different, you know, multicolored fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. But Marty is a super sharp guy and is done, in my opinion, kind of the deepest dive on this nutrient density world of anybody. Matt Lalonde ages ago did some really solid initial work, and Marty actually got back in and reanalyzed his work and then has taken it to a whole other level.
Yeah, when Matt did his thing, we started doing liver. And oh my God, liver is terrible. It is so bad.
It's a tough sell. Yeah, I do some chicken liver here and there, and
we did it like in Heather made all these. We tried it in every different form we possibly could. And the thing that we settled on that, this is a bad phase for us, was raw liver in smoothies. It's like the thing that you freeze it, raw, put it in a smoothie. And it's the thing you could taste the least.
Yeah.
Which
is a whole interesting thing to me. I know
it was like it was organ meats, and then it was like spices was number 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then shellfish or something. And
yeah.
All right. Hey, let me get another. I'm gonna throw out another category for you. I'd love to hear your take on this, and I'd love to kind of just do some quick hitters. Gut health. So when we talk about gut health, first off, like, what are we talking about? And then how do we improve it?
Really good question. And this is where I think paleo was really solid in highlighting this topic, that it was important. And I think it actually spurred a lot of the research that's happened in the last 10 years. Gut health broadly relates to the integrity of the gut. And we have a barrier in the intestines. It's not unlike, like, people hear about the blood-brain barrier. There's this interface where the blood that circulates through our body interfaces with the brain itself, and the nutrients and the oxygen and everything diffuse through a barrier. So the blood from our main circulatory system doesn't go really directly into the brain. It gets kind of sifted through a kind of a diffusion process. And the gut is similar. So you think it's full of shit, literally, you know, and you don't want that stuff in your body. But you've got to get the nutrition that's in the food into your body. So we have these things called tight junctions, and it's cells that are woven very tightly together. And there's a mucosal membrane, almost like a layer of Vaseline in that all of the nutrients that we eat have to go through that. And some of the digestion occurs at that brush border, like a lot of the fat digestion occurs there. But if that mucus layer gets damaged, if the gaps are formed between the intestinal epithelial cells, then whole intact food particles can make its way into the body. And this can lead to systemic inflammation, autoimmune disease, and a bunch of other, problems. The what to do about it is really tough to pin down. Generally, what I find is an elimination diet is kind of where we start. And this is where something like paleo, specific carbohydrate, like they end up looking very, very similar in nature, but we tend to pull a bunch of the common problematic foods out. Hopefully we get clinically better outcomes. People look, feel, and perform better. Then we slowly start reintroducing foods to see how they react to them. Some people recommend these really complex like food allergy tests. I don't find much utility in them. Like every once in a while, again, they may be kind of useful, but I really lean more heavily on that kind of empirical outcome-based process. When you really critically look at the studies on, say, like prebiotics and probiotics and whatnot, about 50% of people improve on these products. Some percentage of them get worse, and some percentage of them have no benefit. And so I think that there's a massive amount
Sounds like a placebo.
Sounds remarkably like a placebo, Yeah. So what's funny is 15 or 20 years ago, like a gastroenterologist would have been like, your diet has no influence on your GI health, has no influence, which seems so stark raving mad to me. It would be like going to a dermatologist and you've got a rash all over your body, and they're like, no, man, the weeding and the poison oak and poison ivy you run through has no influence on this giant surface layer interface in your body, and it's or that, a pulmonologist would be like, no, man, the smoking that you're doing has no effect on your lungs. The food you put through your fucking gut doesn't influence the gut itself. It's kind of like, but you can still find GI docs that are like, diet doesn't change like ulcerative colitis or whatever. It's so remarkably ignorant. It's crazy, but slowly this has changed. Slowly people have realized, yeah, gut health is a real deal thing. Like we think that maybe Alzheimer's and Parkinson's may start in the gut, some alterations in the gut microbiota and the changes in the gut integrity. One of the first things that happens in overreaching and overtraining, so this is more germane to your CrossFit folks, one of the first things that happens in that process when people go too far is they lose intestinal barrier integrity. And people will notice when they are overreaching, overtraining, they'll start getting GI symptoms. And this is where you could have some like hard as nails, hard charger. They can eat anything they want until they can't. And usually the until they can't is when they're pushing really, really hard at the outer edges of performance. And within the bodybuilding circles, for as long as it's existed, usually people cut out wheat and dairy because they notice that they're puffier with these foods because they tend to promote some mild systemic inflammation for folks. So we know that, go ahead. We know that gut health is super important, but the what to do for me really kind of falls to a clinical outcome. We may tinker with pre and probiotics. We may tinker with addition or removal of fiber, but really it's kind of a logic tree thing. Like we try something, yes or no. Did it work? Great. Keep doing it. No. Okay. Then we just keep doing this logic tree until we find what works for people.
Okay, but what's the base of that logic tree? What is the elimination diet? Because people have to eat something. Like they're not gonna fast for 3 weeks and then start to add in one thing.
It varies from person to person. You've got kind of like paleo, which would be
Yeah,
no
for our
grains.
listeners, what would you say? Like, where would you direct them? Like, I want to do this. I want to try it. I want to like see what works for me, what doesn't. I'm going to start with this as a baseline. What is this?
No grains, no legumes, no dairy for 30 days is a solid place to start. And that's the basic paleo template. Somebody that has an autoimmune condition, I would consider going more autoimmune paleo, and even, God help me, I would even say more carnivore at this point. And I'm the person that developed the term autoimmune paleo. Like, I'm the first person that wrote about it, first person that developed it. And observationally, I think that carnivore just crushes the autoimmune paleo diet for autoimmune disease. Like, the shit that I've seen it resolve, I am absolutely dumbfounded by. Some other things that people can look into, specific carbohydrate diet is very, very similar to all of these things. And what you end up with is a list of acceptable and unacceptable foods. And there's several different routes into this, and I don't know that I've really got a favorite. If somebody is experiencing a lot of gas and bloating, then I start thinking about FODMAPs. So a low FODMAP diet, which cuts out onions.
Can you explain what FODMAP is?
It's fermentable carbohydrate. So like onions, beans, apples, pears. But again, there's pretty comprehensive lists on that. But this would be people who have, say, like a lot of diarrhea, gas, bloating. Looking at fermentable carbohydrate is a good place to go. If people are experiencing a lot of brain fog and kind of like lethargy and fatigue around their diet, then they might think about a histamine elimination diet. And this is also where this stuff just gets so mind-numbingly complex. Like, this is kind of where like I pull the ripcord, jump out, and this is where I start farming people out to specialists in these areas, because it gets so granular that it's no longer fun for me at all, and I just don't like the hand-holding process through that. But the point is that none of this applies to everybody. All of it applies to someone, and there's somebody out there, like if you've got a coaching practice, there's somebody, and you've got 100 people, there's some percentage of your folks that if you're not doing some amount of elimination diet thinking, you're failing them in some way. There's some significant improvement they can have in their health and performance. And it may, again, only be cyclically. Like, somebody may deal with wheat or gluten in the off season, but as they start ramping up for the open or something like that, they start noticing, God, I'm having gut cramps all the time. And so you may need to cycle some of that stuff out and stick more with like rice and corn. But I guarantee you that within a 100-person group, if you're coaching folks, there's some percentage of them that would benefit from some amount of tinkering and massaging in this kind of elimination diet world, for sure.
Okay, let's pull it back then, and we won't geek out. We won't go to the place that you start to pull your hair out. Let's do. Imagine that you're speaking to a person that does CrossFit 5 days a week. They sit at their desk otherwise. They are interested in competing in the CrossFit Open. They're in their mid-30s, early 40s. I know it's hard to be both, but this is a really special individual. And they're interested in performance. They're interested in looking better. They have no real issues, no gut issues really. They probably could sleep a little bit better. Kind of like your normal CrossFit athlete. Let me ask you 5 or 6 different things, and just like hit me with it, like real quick. See if you
first thing I'll hit is that I orient everything around, if it improves sleep, it's good.
Yeah, I love that.
So
okay.
Just says
post-workout shake. Post-workout shake, yes or no?
Oh God, it depends. It depends on the person. Like, I mean, we've had a team, third place finisher at the CrossFit Games. I've personally coached team to third place, multiple individuals to top 10 placing, and I didn't use a shake with any of those people. And we tinkered in and out, but we didn't find it really that beneficial for folks. I'm the crazy guy that thinks the bulk of your nutrition should come from food that you chew. And so
even with the high level athletes.
Yeah. So again, but like in a pinch, time crunched.
If you can't get the macros in otherwise.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Vitamin D.
Yes. And ideally
Fish
from
oil.
the sun, real quick on the vitamin D, ideally from the sun, if you need to buy a Spurdy vitamin D lamp, that's not a bad idea. Short of
So
that,
you would go lamp over supplementation.
generally, yes. And what you do in that, so if you don't want to buy a membership to a basic tanning salon is going to be like $15 to $20 a month. What you do is you find a low pressure UVA, UVB bed. It's the kind of like old beds that the people don't like because they always try to upsell you on the ones that only take like 2 or 3 minutes. You don't want high intensity. You want the lower intensity. And if you could be in there, so you would start off at like 2 to 5 minutes as your session. And and this will depend on skin type and a bunch of other factors. But if you could stay in for 20 minutes, you only stay in for about 8 to 10 because you are not doing this to get tan. You are doing this to enhance vitamin D production. So I did this over the last year, and my sole source of kind of vitamin D supplementation was from doing a tanning booth for about 6 to 8 minutes, 2 to 3 days a week, and I took my vitamin D levels from the 60s to the mid 80s just doing that. And what happens, if you have to supplement, that's better than having low vitamin D levels. But in the production of vitamin D, it goes through this production of corticosteroid cascades that increase nitric oxide production. So like vasodilation, and it enhances testosterone production. It's a beta endorphin, upregulator. And so you feel much, much better. So there's all this other good stuff that comes as a consequence of that sunning session. And I've talked about it on podcasts and kind of like the way to break down. But again, I didn't have a tan from doing this. Like I had a very minimal, tan on my person from doing this. The goal was to be in as little as possible to maximize vitamin D, not induce a tan, which is going to necessitate me staying in there longer to continue to produce more vitamin D. Yeah.
Just so you know, every 25-year-old girl that just heard this only heard go tanning.
I know.
They heard nothing else. The beta hydroxybutylate and they were like, I'm re-upping my membership.
Well, and what I am not advocating for is turning yourself into a leather handbag. And so it's, which people lose their minds and they're like, my kid is a redhead. And I'm like, okay, gingers only stay in for a minute or 30 seconds. Like there is some safe level of exposure, and safe is a relative thing. Like this is another thing in the age of COVID that people act like there's no fucking trade-off with what we do. There is a modest increase, a non-trivial increase in the risk of skin cancers with sunbed exposure. But all of the studies that have been done only look at people attending or not attending sunbeds. Virtually nobody uses a sunbed for vitamin D production. They mainly use it for tanning. Right. So they're maximizing the amount of time that they can be in there. And I think that there's some sort of a slope associated with that, where there's also a bunch of data that suggests that if people have increased vitamin D levels, it reduces their likelihood of all other cancers much greater than it increases their likelihood of developing skin cancer. Then we have these other interesting things that lifeguards and construction workers who get a lot of outdoor activity have remarkably low skin cancer rates. The person who tends to get skin cancer is the indoors office worker who gets burned on vacation, doesn't go back out in the sun, and that is actually more dangerous than the person who has serial exposure, but they ramp up to it over time. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
See, right, I can't do short answers. I just suck at short answers.
Fish oil.
Yes.
Go.
Fish oil. This might be something to look at getting a EPA DHA to arachidonic acid ratio before you start supplementing. There are some kind of ideal ranges, and I forget what they are off the top of my head, but that can help you dial that in. I would recommend probably a really high quality liquid, and you keep that in your refrigerator. You do not want to supplement with oxidized fish oil. It's pretty gnarly stuff.
And if you're consuming wild caught fish, cold water fish,
that's a great way to do it. Like a couple of times a week, you're probably good to go then if you're doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caffeine.
Depends. Some people do great with it. So here's a thing to take away from this. When we look at the average half-life of caffeine within the whole human population, on average, it takes people 8 hours to, like if you consumed 200 milligrams of caffeine, standard cup of coffee, takes you 8 hours to metabolize half of that. Some people metabolize that in 4 hours. Some people metabolize that in like 36 hours. So there are some people that they're like, I have a cup of coffee and I can't sleep at night. And people are like, oh, that's bullshit. I will about guarantee you that the slow metabolizer is the person that is still experiencing problems at night from having a single cup of coffee in the morning. So it's another one of these things that just really depends. I will say that the ergogenic effects of caffeine flatline very quickly. So like a half a cup of coffee tends to be more within the ergogenic window than like 6 cups of coffee. You
and what
actually
do you mean by
get
the ergogenic. What does that mean?
the performance enhancing effect. So like resistance to fatigue, mobilizing fat and glucose. If you overshoot that, caffeine becomes an ergolytic. It becomes performance damaging. So this is where shit like Monsters and stuff like that, like you literally should be drinking like a third of it a day, not the whole thing. And it's ironic that in the doping circles, like the Olympic drug testing circles and whatnot, the amount of caffeine that they will ding you for having in your system is clearly at a level that is already damaging your performance. So it's like this ridiculous thing. But more is not better on caffeine. People will habituate to it, but if they really want it as an ergogenic aid, they should figure out what their minimum effective dose is and then really use it sparingly and targeted for therapeutic effect. It shouldn't be something that you use in the same way every single day.
And beyond the sleep effects and performance enhancing or diminishing, is there other biological repercussions? Does it do anything into the arteries? Does it do anything to our gut? Is there other things that go on from caffeine consumption?
No, beyond that, the literature on coffee, both caffeinated and decaffeinated, is that there seems to be a linear correlation with increasing consumption and increasing longevity. Now, it's correlative, but coffee does a lot of different stuff. It has like 600 constituents in it. So this is where I would recommend folks, if you just like coffee, you want kind of a warm beverage to kind of sip on and, warm up your hands in the morning or whatever, shift to like decaf or like a half calf or something. Like be more targeted in the caffeine application. But all that said, some people just don't react well to it. Like some people that have the histamine intolerance problems, they do negatively react to most coffee products, which they could use different caffeine sources like tea or even, something like an energy drink or something like that separately.
Okay. Speaking of energy drink, what about like beta alanine?
What else are you already doing? Like, are you super dialed on your sleep? Are you going to bed early? Do you wear blue blockers before bed? Are you getting like if you eat 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, are 19 of those meals like whole unprocessed foods? Are you getting outside and getting an hour of sun a day on your skin? Do you have meaningful social relationships? Like all of that shit is going to matter so much more than beta alanine is. And if you really care about performance, all of those other things should happen first. And then, yeah, that's great. There are some ergogenic benefits to that. But like, I would just go do a deep dive on like everything you can do to improve your sleep, because there's nothing more anabolic, more restorative than sleep. And you can do all of this other stuff. And if you are still going to the well and limiting your sleep, then I can't think of a possibly more ergolytic, a performance decreasing process than inadequate sleep.
Love that. We talk sleep a lot on here, so really love that. Would you put creatine in the same category?
Creatine, everybody should be drinking it. Like it's just like 5 grams a day. You don't need to load it. Neuroprotective, antioxidant. I mean, some people respond well to it from a performance standpoint. Even non-performer or non-performance enhancing folks likely see benefit from like neuroprotection and whatnot. And it's so cheap. no real negative side effects to it. I mean, creatine is another one of those things that like, everybody should be using it. Older adults, like our aging parents and whatnot, if you can sneak some creatine into their diet, but this is also where a meat-rich diet, you get significant amounts of creatine also. Yeah.
Okay, so similar to that, everybody should be doing. Would you put bone broth in that same category? Should we all be doing bone broth?
Probably, but again, like we've seen a lot of people that have histamine intolerance problems, so some gut issues, and bone broth makes a lot of histamine and that slow kind of breakdown of the protein. So, in theory, it's a really good thing, but for a lot of people, practically, it ends up being problematic from a gut issue. Yeah.
Okay. How do we feed our kids?
Oh, fuck. I've written a couple of pieces on this. So like even for us, I'm super gluten intolerant. Like if I get a hold of some wheat, like it'll really tear me up. Although that said, I've tinkered with my gut health over time and it's a lot better. Like I've had some gluten exposures and it doesn't cripple me the way that it's done in the past. It's still bad enough that I'm not going to go out and like pressure test that, but at least like my cross reactivity stuff seems to be a lot better than what it was in the past. Neither of my kids react super badly to gluten, but my oldest has some problems with almonds, and it sucks. Like I thought I did everything right. Like we moved to a farm, we had farm animals, they played in the dirt, they had shit under their fingernails. Like I thought I did everything right in that regard, but they still, both of them have had a little bit of skin rash stuff. One of them's more kind of allergic to cats and whatnot. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I tried to do the best I could with that. But at home, we're very protein centric. So you got to eat your protein. My kids hate vegetables other than...
So what do they eat for protein? What do you give them?
Everything. Beef, lamb, pork, chicken, fish.
And they do all that.
They crush all that. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
The oldest likes seafood.
How do you prepare it? Like, what do you like specifically? Like, and first off, how old are your kids?
8 and 6. 2 girls.
That's mine.
Yeah.
Mine,
2 girls, 8 and 6. Soups, grilled meat. I use the air fryer frequently. The oldest likes seafood a little bit better than the youngest, but the youngest is kind of coming on. The oldest does not like slippery stuff, so like fatty things. Whereas the youngest likes slippery stuff. So they do a little bit of you eat this and I'll take that. It's a bastard cooking bacon because one of them likes them slippery and the other one likes it crispy. And so like I've got to take some off at different points. But there's not really too many protein sources that the kids don't eat. Vegetable wise, they will crush a kale salad with this particular dressing that my wife puts together, which is olive oil, apple cider vinegar, garlic, and a bunch of salt. I mean, like a shitload of salt. But literally like a bowl of that kale salad, my kids will go face first into. Most people that we've encountered, if their kids try that, they will crush it. My kids will do a good balsamic vinaigrette. They'll do asparagus a bit. They eat a lot of fruit, but I make it very protein centric. It's like you have to eat the protein. And then from there, I don't really care that much. Like if they want some rice, they want this. We don't have any gluten products in the house. We buy a lot of high quality dark chocolate, like the 80 to 90% dark chocolate. I don't regulate that. They can eat it however and whenever they want to. They have full, complete access to it. Around Halloween, when they get all the shitty chocolate, I do monitor that, and they get like 1 piece a day after a meal. After about 2 weeks, the rest of it disappears. But here's an interesting aside. We let them self-regulate with Rebel ice cream, which is a low-carb ice cream. They both really enjoy it. They like it, but they'll do 1 bowl of it, and then they put the bowl away, and they're good. Regular ice cream, like a Haagen-Dazs or whatnot, they'll eat the whole bowl, and then they want another bowl. And another bowl, and another bowl. And so like if we go out to eat and like they offer like a small ice cream sundae as part of the thing, and the kids have done a good job at school and all the rest of the, the other things, they can have one, and we try not to call it a treat. I try not to emotionalize that stuff, but we'll let them have some of that. But I really try to give them options that they spontaneously self-regulate with. And I've talked to them about like, hey, if you had a bunch of Hershey's chocolate in here, would you just have one? And both of them are like, no, I would eat all of them. I'm like, that could be a problem, right? And they're like, yeah. And so we talk to them about the work that we do, about the fact that both of their grandparents have died early from metabolic disease, and that was a consequence of their diet, and that there's just consequences, and that we try to stack the deck in our favor so that we make, better choices and whatnot. We have some corn chips in the house. We do some siete chips. Again, we'll regulate those a little bit more because they're kind of hyper palatable, and the kids will kind of go face down in a bowl and not come out until the whole thing is eaten. But I'm also just not as, if they do a good job eating the protein, then it tends to mitigate the likelihood of them eating a whole bag of like siete lemon lime, chips. So that protein centric approach has been interesting. And Fridays we usually do family pizza night. My wife makes some gluten-free pizzas for the kids. I do kind of a pizza type thing. Really interesting deal with that. The kids really like it. Nikki does an amazing homemade pizza, like great sauce and everything. But the kids spontaneously said, Dad, I don't feel so good when I only eat pizza. Can you cook a little protein so I can have that with the pizza? Because they would get about 60 grams of carbs from that personal pizza. And then you could tell they were like kind of lethargic and cranky, and they don't have like these meltdown poopy pants moments. Like they just really don't, unless they get a hold of like serially some shitty food. And it was interesting that even they asked for, like, they felt so bad after that. They really liked the pizza, but they internally noticed, they're like, man, if I have some protein with this, I feel a lot better. And so I try to create it in a way that they are really driving the boat most of the time. They make the decisions, they do the regulating, and I just kind of offer a little governor here and there when it's in a situation where it's just going to be really difficult to make good decisions. Yeah.
Cool. With a protein centric focus, what are you looking for in terms of making sure that it's good quality, like a better meat? Like what is a better meat?
We order a whole or a half grass-fed beef for ourselves. We usually do the same thing with some lamb. When we were in Texas, pastured pork was really easy to get. Montana, it's more challenging. But I'm honestly not that crazy in that. Like, we found these Teton Waters grass-fed hot dogs that both girls absolutely love. The Adele's sausages, they really like those. But we get like some maple sausage that we do for breakfast. We do some of the, like ham steaks for breakfast. We actually do I guess a decent amount of like processed meat, but I'm not that wrapped around the axle of that stuff relative to the not eating a bagel, they're not eating cereal, all that type of stuff. Yeah.
Cool. So hearing that correctly, it's a piece of chicken, any piece of chicken to you would like in quote unquote like industrial raised. We try to get
like the organic stuff, but if we can't find it, if we're out to eat, I don't sweat it. Like when we buy for the house, and a lot of that is just more honestly like kind of the ethics and sustainability side. I'm not that spun out on like hormones or antibiotics or anything else like that. Yeah. I'm way less extreme than probably most of the people that follow me, honestly. Yeah. Which maybe should be an insight for those folks, but I keep beating my head against the wall on that. So yeah. But I will say this, not to toot our horn, but frequently in restaurants, another thing, just as an aside, we have a very minimal device experience in our house. Our wife and I have online businesses, so we do that stuff. But like when we're out to eat, when we're at the dinner table, there's no phones, there's no devices. The kids get very minimal device interaction. We bring art books and different like writing stuff to restaurants, and we all like sketch and color, and I still look like Fred Flintstone drawing shit, but people comment all the time that our kids actually say please, thank you, make eye contact, shake hands, all that stuff, and that it's not like a meltdown shit show at dinner, and that we are talking to each other throughout the whole meal. Like if we're out at a restaurant or whatever, like you look around and everybody's on a device and except us. And not that we're like elitist or anything, but I just think about looking back when I'm on my deathbed and like, fuck man, I wish I could have spent one more meal out on my device while I was hanging out with my kids, you know? And so we really try to draw all of that stuff together, because when you want to talk about like addictiveness, like these devices are crazy. Like I don't know if you guys know this, it's impossible to set up on your iPhone like a password lock to prevent someone accessing a particular app. Like you can't do that for your kids. It's very, very difficult to set up that gatekeeping because they want the kids in there. They want full access to all of that. It's just like the fucking potato chip guys, wanting to fly a drone over your house and drop, here's a sample, guys, give it a shot. So just as an aside.
Once you pop, you can't stop.
Yes. Yeah.
We could talk forever about the parenting thing, the screen times thing, distractions, and how that it's more than just what it looks on the face level as well. It's not just like you're missing time with your kids. It's the cascade of bad crap that's going on internally and setting up stress, and now you're not digesting the food correctly, and just like it spins out of control forever. But
yeah,
we'll save all that, especially the parenting stuff, which we could go on forever. We are also parents of young kids, and love chatting up about that, especially the people that seem like they're doing a really good job of it. So we'll have you back on, Rob.
We'll see. Both kids may end up being strippers or something, but so far so good. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
To each their own, as long as they're artistic with it and they enjoy it.
I know several that are very nice people. So yeah.
Yes, I'm going to go home and look up epistemology, quantum mechanics, and Newtonian physics.
Perfect.
So so next time we talk, I can understand what you're talking about. So
I didn't understand what I was talking about, so I don't know if it's going to help either one of us. So,
Rob, what's the best place for folks to find you to learn more about what you're doing, other than the books? What's the best place to send them to?
Probably robbwolf.com, and then also join.thehealthyrebellion.com. Both places you can find our podcast. That's really the main thing that I'm kind of putting out in the world. I have an assistant that posts stuff to social media, but I have abandoned it wholesale. It's kind of a dark place that leads to a cesspool. And so I've just kind of refused to engage there. I still try to put out some value to folks, but I just can't do the back and forth in those venues. But try to generate some really good content via the podcast. And then for a deeper dive, we have that community within the Healthy Rebellion. I do write a lot for the drinklmnt.com blog. So like I have a ton of material that pops up over there also.
Yeah. Not that Rob needs the extra plugs, but the drink element, the electrolyte supplement, it's pretty phenomenal. Tried it and big fan. And then anybody that hasn't read Rob's books, they're terrific. I really resonate. Oh my gosh, you're like this. I can't end podcasts. But like the palate fatigue, like I never even heard of that term before the Wired to Eat and the Joey Chestnut and how he goes like he's stuffed and like, no, I'm gonna have some ice cream and now I can have more fries or burger, whatever. It's just like, I really encourage people to go. It's such, everyone will resonate. It's so real world nutrition talk. So big fan. Have you guys go check that stuff out.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks,
we'll put everything into the show notes for links and stuff for folks who want to get there easily. And thank you to everybody out there listening. Thanks for your ratings and your reviews. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Chasing Excellence. You can get every episode of Chasing Excellence wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Until next time, thank you for listening.